Listen to the song of a city, the great theme of a living metropolis, translated into melody as NBC salutes our honor city for today, Boise, Idaho, with Big City Serenade. Starring Skip Farrell, Joseph Galicchio, and the NBC Orchestra, and your narrator, Charles Chan. From Chicago, we bring you Big City Serenade. Hello, Skip. Mind if I draw up a microphone and join you for a couple of weeks?
Well, Chan, glad to have you aboard to help sing a serenade of cities while Henry Cook is vacationing. We're heading west today, as you probably know.
To a city which says it's one of the few in the West which can't be labeled a boom town.
I'd like to deny that or lay claim to the fact that for a young fellow, it's certainly booming. After all, it was only incorporated as a first-class city in 1905.
Booming's a good word, so are vigorous and progressive.
I'll buy them. And out there in this non-boom town of Boise, Idaho, is our NBC affiliate, KIDO. And we'd like to send thanks to its general manager, Walter Wagstaff, for a generous assist in getting material for this show.
If it hadn't been for him, we wouldn't have known that an important national institution originated in Boise. Back in 1919, when Boise was just a kid, they inaugurated Music Week, and our serenade today is our own small contribution to the big event.
Chan, they also have something more than man-made music out in Boise. Ever hear cottonwoods rustling in the breeze?
Well, yes, but I don't see what that has to do with Boise.
My fine friend, that's Boise itself.
Give.
Well, that's what I've been leading up to. French-Canadian voyageurs named the town. They'd had a long trek through some of Idaho's drier regions when they suddenly came on the Boise Valley and saw a clump of cottonwoods.
I'm beginning to see light.
Fine. And these fellows were so glad to see the trees, they yelled les bois, meaning, of course, the woods. Naturally, the pronunciations changed a little during the years, but that's where it came from.
Bet they'd still say that today because the trees are pretty impressive in Boise. Not to say outside the city where you run into some of the finest forests in the country. Headquarters for Boise National Forest and Payette National Forest are in the city itself.
So the woods still holds good for Boise. And that's why Joseph Galicchio chose a piece called In the Woods, especially as a serenade for Boise.
Well, nothing could be fairer than that, a tune called In the Woods for a City Which Means the Woods.
But you can't stop at trees when you start talking scenery, Chan, which Boise has in large, king-sized portions. A couple of mountain ranges, for instance, the Bitterroots and the Sawtooth. And that's really something to have peeking over the horizon at you.
You know, taking the state as a whole, I think you can't beat it for scenery and contrast. You go from 700 feet to something over 12,000. You can get dune country and agricultural land.
And contrast is a somewhat mild word. In Boise, you get an almost perfect climate. You can be sniffing apple blossoms in Boise while a few miles away they're still digging out from under a blizzard.
Say, you and Henry Cook seem to be fond of tracking down Paul Bunyan.
Oh, you've been reading our past scripts, huh?
Yeah, I'd like to know how the other half lives.
Yeah.
Well, you know, your friend Paul got into Idaho, too. Pretty close to Boise, in fact.
No.
He sure did. Paul's the fellow responsible for the Snake River. They say he got slightly, illuminated one night, and the winding Snake River came up in his footsteps.
Yeah, it must have been some stroll, and Paul must have been pretty close to the saturation point.
Well, I never listen to gossip myself, but that's what I hear. Of course, right now, I'd rather hear you sing, Skipper. Got a song for Idaho?
Sure have, Charlie. Away beyond the hills in Idaho, where yawning canyons greet the sun, as it smiles above the trees in Idaho, to say another night is done. Warm summer winds toss the waving grain, calling me back to my home again, to dream sweet memories of long ago, beyond the hills in Idaho. Beyond the hills in Idaho, where yawning canyons greet the sun, I'll dream sweet memories of long ago, beyond the hills in Idaho.
Idaho, well, you certainly couldn't come any closer to picking a theme song for the state. But let's get back to Boise itself and its Music Week Festival.
One of the things I'd especially like to see, Chan, is the Basque part of the festival.
Basque? Like in the sun?
No, Basque like in the Pyrenees. Those colorful people who live partly in France and partly in Spain.
Now I'm beginning to click. The people who gave us Jai and the beret.
They've always fascinated me. Did you ever hear the old saying, Basque and faithful?
Oh.
Well, that's what they are. And the Basque colony in and around Boise is the second largest in the world.
Well, something new has been added to Chan's education.
Yeah, the Farrells, too. Anyhow, they've become a solid, substantial portion of Boise.
Well, weren't the Basques always seafaring men? Seems to me. I've read that somewhere.
Seafaring and sheep herding. Every year they have their sheep herders' ball, what they'd call in their own country a romeria.
Romeria? A dance, maybe?
A dance or a festival. And thanks to our friend Walter Wagstaff at KIDO, we have some typical Basque music. One of those you'd hear during their folk dancing in Music Week.
Is that what this jota is?
Jota, I guess, can be a Spanish dance, too, but this is certainly Basque. It's called Eco de la Romeria.
If that's typical Basque music, I'm for it. You know, you gave me a jolt with your story of the Basques in Boise, so now I've got one for you.
The Basque?
No, a jolt.
Oh.
Do you happen to know the name of the first settler in Boise?
Sure, Lewis and Clark, huh? Right, huh?
Well, that's 50% for effort, but they weren't the first settlers in Boise.
Oh?
Okay, Mr. Farrell, take a good grip on your script and listen to Professor Chan. In 1863, my good man, a gentleman named John A. O'Farrell built himself a cabin where a month later a group organized and located the site of Boise City.
Sure and no fooling.
No fooling. What have you got to say to that?
Well, I've always wanted to live in the West, so I just happen to have a little song handy which should fit the occasion.
And it's Little Gray Home in the West, or my name's John A. O'Farrell.
When the golden sun sinks in the hills and the toil of a long day is o'er, though the road may be long in the lilt of a song, I forget I was weary before. For ahead where the blue shadows fall, I shall come to contentment and rest, and the toils of the day will be all charmed away in my little gray home of the West. There are hands that will welcome me in. There are lips I am burning to kiss. There are two eyes that shine just because they are mine, and 1,000 things other men miss. It's a corner of heaven itself, though it's only a tumble-down nest. But with love brooding there, why, no place can compare with my little gray home in the
That was Skip Farrell's own personal salute to the first settler of Boise, and he couldn't do less for a gentleman named O'Farrell.
Well, all I have to say is that Mr. O'Farrell found himself a fine place to live.
A city with a perfect climate, loaded with natural hot springs. Imagine living in a house heated by tapping a hot spring.
Maybe that's where Paul Bunyan got the giant jag that started the Snake River.
More likely at Boise's Naked Truth Saloon.
Hey, that's a strange name.
Well, the proprietor was even stranger, a man by the name of Lawrence. He advertised, "I have commenced the business of making drunkards, paupers, and beggars for the sober, industrious, and respectable portion of the community to support. I will furnish an article which will increase fatal accidents."
Yeah, well, he's a frank gentleman, anyhow. But let's not deal out the impression that spirituous liquors are too important a commodity in Boise.
Well, if you're thinking of Idaho potatoes, Boise also pours out hay and grain, vegetables, and fruits. Prunes from Boise Valley are famous. So are the dairy products, with the Basque prominent among the sheepmen.
And then there's only one thing to do. Give out with a nod to Boise's agriculturalists. How about listening to Sheep and Goat Walk into the Pasture? Well, Chan, since we're back to the Basque colony again, I don't think we ever did get around to mentioning that their dances and music are a big part of Boise's Music Week.
The more I hear of Music Week out in Idaho, Skip, the more impressive it sounds.
This year they're having, or did have, it was last night, a full evening of dance music contributed from all parts of the world, and American folk dances had a big part in the evening, too.
Well, don't they have a wonderful lantern parade sometime during the festival? Wait a minute, it's part of the grand climax in Music Week, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a beautiful thing. The school children make these lanterns themselves as part of their art classes, and their march is one of the most impressive of the whole festival.
I'd like to take part myself. Maybe I can declare myself in on the traditional Song of the Basque part of Music Week.
Well, that's fine with me. How are you going about it?
Well, we found the Song of the Basque ourselves, and here it is.
Here it is indeed, a Basque Serenade. Go ahead, Skip.
Star of mine, my dearest treasure, more beloved than words can say. Though your door be barred my measure, I come to sing at break of day. And my voice to you ascending wings its way that you be told. How I wait your smile attending, the while I love your dreams of gold. And I scorn the grief I'm feeling, nor my deep chagrin will show, since your silver laughter pealing would grant no mercy to my woe. What if death me from you sever? You would ne'er my passing rue, yet my soul, your captive ever, would die as well for love of you.
That was a Basque Serenade, but with it we'd like to serenade all the groups that make up Boise's Music Week.
Music Week, by the way, Chan, is practically a year-round affair in Boise. As soon as one is over, they go to work on the upcoming festival for the next year.
Music's always been a big item to Boise. Skip, remember that picture we saw of the old Philharmonic Orchestra? 8 very serious musicians they were, making music while Boise was building itself into a first-class city.
I wonder if they had early concerts under the stars. Chan, can you picture those music weeks out there? Western stars are just a little extra special in the line of sky decoration, and with the mountains looming over the city, no wonder people go miles to take part.
And no wonder a special religious pageant is the culmination of all Music Week pageants.
This year's religious pageant takes place tomorrow at Bronco Stadium, and I understand that the costumes this year are even more beautiful than they've been in other years.
Well, we can't be there, but maybe we can add our own contribution to Boise's Music Week climax as Joseph Galicchio and the orchestra play César Franck's beautiful Prayer. rhythms of one of our great cities, Boise, Idaho, NBC has built for you this Big City Serenade. We've presented in this song of a city Skip Farrell and Joseph Colicchio with the NBC Orchestra. Each week at this time, NBC will salute a different city in this Big City Serenade. This is Charles Chan inviting you to join us again next week when our musical bow will be toward Rochester, New York. Big City Serenade is produced by Ralph Knowles, script by Morgan Perrin, engineer Robert Becker. 3 chimes mean good times on NBC. Tomorrow you're invited to meet Mr. and Mrs. Blandings once again. Cary Grant and Betsy Drake star in the title roles as the proud owners of the famous Dream House. And on Theater Guild on the Air tomorrow, you'll hear Paul Douglas in a 1-hour adaptation of Ring Lardner's famous comedy, Elmer the Great. It's another outstanding Theater Guild production. This is NBC, the National Broadcasting Company.